A lot of people complain that I'm not a former cricketer and so that I don't really know the game. Well, you know what they can't claim? That I don't know desks. I've been using desks for years. I'm a collector of desks, old and new, and I am sitting on a new one right now. I am the Don Bradman of sitting at desks. So when I tell you that the E7 Pro next generation height adjustable desk from Flexispot is legit, this is like Michael Jordan talking to you about sneakers. This desk holds 160 kilograms. It is as stable as anything I've ever seen, and it has under-desk cable management. But really, the main skill here is that this desk rises and falls at the push of a button, and it moves super quick. And it has so many settings that remember your favorite heights. It really does it all. And I could not recommend the E7 Pro from Flexispot anymore, even though I am currently sitting on one of Flexispot's BS12 Pro multifunctional, adjustable, upgraded fabric ergonomic chairs. My butt and computer have never been happier than when using one of Flexispot's products. So get over to their page right now for big savings. Morning everyone, and welcome to the Wagon Wheel podcast, the show where I answer your questions about cricket. If you have already got involved in Patreon, then I have your questions all lined up. If not, and especially if you're in the YouTube watching this live, the best way of asking a question on Wagon Wheel is via Super Chat feature. But any questions, and all questions and comments are welcome. And thanks to the people who we've got in Arco. Samit's already put a super chat in. All Things Cinema Podcast, DM95. So thank you to everyone for already getting involved over there as well. But let us move on to the actual question answering part of the thingy, as I so smoothly suggested there. VM says, so the second match in the India-South Africa test ended in 2 days, 107 overs. Same test in India, everyone would cry about the pitch. Well, everyone did cry about this pitch. Like, literally, I cannot understand what... We had both captains talking about the pitch. We had all the home commentators talking about the pitch. We had the groundsman apologize to the home captain. Don't know if he did it to Rohit. Or maybe he did. Maybe it was sort of a joint thing about that. What are we talking about here? I don't understand why people keep saying, no one's talking about it. Really? Do some research. Listen to the commentary. There was plenty of stuff going on about the pitch. So what if the ball spins from ball one? Who made that rule? That's not what the rule is. Generally, balls spin on day one, especially in places like England. So that's not the rule. So again, you're fighting. I think a lot of people on this pitch are fighting straw man arguments against the wrong thing. This was one of the most discussed pitches in the world. How is it not going to be, right? So again, another just absolutely bizarre comment about this wicket. Let's see what else VM says. The game's financial well-being depends on the Indian markets. So what is the harm in giving India the advantage in Indian conditions? Well, the harm is that they don't make as much money from the test matches because they don't last very long. So there is actually, if you're talking about financially, there is a big harm in that. And I know that has been discussed, within Indian cricket circles. I don't know, well, perhaps from the BCCI, but certainly other people involved. And they... part of the idea, and this is a problem that I know during the wobble ball era where we had a lot of low scoring tests outside of India as well, plus Indian wickets as well, that some of the broadcasters and streaming companies were a little bit like, well, can you make your test go for 3.5 days or 4 days? At the very, give us something in that. So if you're asking financially, VM, again, it's another straw man argument because no one's saying these things. But okay, frankly, I would like the rest of the world to just show up and play, thank you, and leave. Okay, but you're the one bringing it up at the moment, right? And there were plenty of people in my comments who were saying and sending messages to me complaining about the wicket. So they didn't do exactly what you've asked other teams to do. Teams are going to moan about the wicket, man. They do it in T20 franchises. They're going to do it everywhere. I would say that is as much a part of cricket as anything else in cricket, is literally away teams complaining about the pitches. I remember when England and Australia were the powerhouse, and a lot of the stuff was done that way when they wanted it done. Again, so this is maybe one of the worst questions I've had asked here, VM. Thank you for your support. but I tell you what, because you're fighting something, this is what Srinivasan said. Srinivasan basically said at a meeting I'm paraphrasing, but said at a meeting, well, wait a minute, Australia and England could do it whatever they wanted. Why can't we do the same? Well, you can't complain about something and then say, well, we're going to do it as well. You can't win a moral argument if you're on both sides of the moral dilemma. That was wrong, so we're going to do the wrong thing. What? What are you even talking about here? Right? And the whole now it's our turn. Is it? What does that mean? Right? South Africa have been doctoring their wickets for years, right? I'm trying to think of other teams. I mean, South Africa's probably the main one, and then India started doing it. We've got 2 teams doing it. I would argue that the bigger hypocrisy is that people weren't upset about the South African pitch doctoring for a long period of time. I think there's a worthy argument in that. What I wouldn't agree with is that England and Australia ran cricket badly, so India should run cricket badly. That's a friggin' brain dead idea, right? We're trying to run the game better. That is the idea. And I think there's a changing, I do think there's a changing belief in wickets. I can't remember if I said this, where I said this recently. I can't remember if it was on one of these podcasts or not, but I do think as more people play T20 cricket, the wickets are absolutely doctored in T20 cricket all the time. And it happens more in first class cricket now than it probably did traditionally as well. And there's a whole generation of cricketers who don't think about this the same way that people did before. I think that, again, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And if you look at the South African argument, I think what the South African cricket said was, we think our players are tougher, so we're going to make our wickets so you have to be tough to score runs on them. I would argue that when that goes wrong, it's dangerous, and that's probably what we saw at times at Cape Town. And it did go wrong there. That wasn't what that wicket was supposed to be, right? Which is a big difference between actually trying to make a wicket that you have to be tough to bat on. And that is the problem with pitch doctoring. When it goes wrong, it goes so wrong that the game sort of is unplayable. And that wicket probably wasn't quite there. But as I've said before, if the game had gone an extra session and a half, maybe that's where it was going from that point of view. At the end of his message, he's tell me why he's wrong. Well, a lot of this is straw man arguments. And also, you didn't follow the fact that everyone complained about that wicket. In fact, one of the few people who didn't complain about that was Rohit Sharma. Because as I said, I think he's one of those newer generations of people. The issue, the difference between the spinning thing and the seam thing is always the same. And it's ignored by everyone who is upset. And I think some of that upset is rightfully that because Australia and England did run the game, there is a bias against wickets that spin early, inherent to the game. Where the nonsense comes in, VM, and it comes in so thick and fast, is that the difference is that on a wicket that is seam friendly, it can flatten out, right? Whereas generally on a wicket that spins really violently, will only spin more violently as the game goes on. So there is a fundamental issue that is different between those two things, right? The second thing is that on a wicket that seems quite violently, spinners can actually play a really important role, and sometimes they get a lot of turn as well. Whereas on these wickets that often spin massively, your quicks can take the game off, right? So you're looking at a more one-dimensional game at times as well. The other thing is that generally when a wicket is, and this is not like this South African one, but as a general rule in New Zealand, South Africa, England, when you have these really short matches from seam bowling, it is usually because the ball has also swung, right? Which is not as pitch dependent. I mean, you can make a small argument that that extra grass on the wicket allows for more swing, but to be honest, the outfields in some of these places also allow for more swing. Not to mention all the different, when the tides come in and, breezes and all these different things that can factor into swing. Plus just certain balls swing more, right? Like, one person picks up a Duke's ball. The last Ashes is a perfect example of this, of the replacement ball. Part of the reason that the replacement ball angered people so much is that the other ball, even when it was brand new, didn't swing as much as the replacement ball did. So there's all those different elements to swing bowling. So that is the answer to all this. But the interesting thing is that you didn't go out and actually have a look at the interesting conversations that were made about that pitch. The fact that the groundsman admitted that he made a mistake. The fact that the home commentators were more than happy to actually put the foot in, right? And I think we've seen that in some Indian test matches as well. But at the moment, there are only 2 teams doctoring their wickets to help the home sides massively. Australia don't need to do it because their pitches are pre-doctored. The New Zealand wickets are kind of look green, but end up being batting paradises. Last summer, I suppose England would kind of well, allegedly was supposed to be doctoring the wickets to help the home team, but I don't think that went particularly well, and they probably just fell back to normal wickets. Pakistan were doctoring them to have flatter wickets, so the cricket went for longer, and that was incredibly horrendous. Sri Lanka, most of those wickets are just what they are. And I'm trying to think of any of the other. There was a movement in the West Indies to make the wickets more seam friendly. But that was because they felt that West Indies fans who like Test cricket also so. It was a bit more fan based than it was anything else. So we have to be really, really smart when we're talking about this sort of stuff, because there was a bias at one stage, and I think that bias still is involved in a lot of the media. But bringing up the South Africa test is the stupidest argument you could make. And as I said, I think there's just a lot of straw man arguments that people bring up here. And this is not the place for straw man arguments. I'm just going to dismiss them. I'm not going to be interested in that nonsense. You come here with a real research take on this, and I'll have a go at answering it for you. But this is, sadly, VM, it's not a great question. That's okay. It's all right. You're allowed. Everyone, I want this space to be a place where you guys can ask the questions that you want. But let's make sure that you're following the right thing. I think there are plenty of other wickets that you could make this complaint about. This was a wicket that I think they tried to, and this is the kind of wicket that I think should be penalised. And that would go for wickets in anywhere in the world. And the reason I think it should be penalised specifically is because they tried to make it go against type. And I think I've got no problem with making the wicket a bit more friendly to home teams in certain situations, but we have enough data on these major test venues more often than not now to know how the ball reacts and what it does, and that you should be making sure that the wicket still does the basic things that it has always done. And I think that is where they had a problem here. But essentially, all this can be answered by science. Vikas says, "Hi, Jarrod. Didn't expect that from you. Didn't expect what from me? What are we talking about here? If you're going to say something like that, you need to tell me what I said, Vikas. Two weird opening questions we've had here today. I have no idea what you're talking about. Rohit is finished in T20s. Well, he's not. He's probably going to play for a little while longer. He's been horrible in the last 6 or 7 T20 World Cups. The last 6 or 7 T20 World Cups. Terrible in the IPL for last few years. Sometimes you have to say that you aren't good enough anymore. Okay. I don't know what this is in reaction to, though. I have no... It's just a rant. Again, like, if you want to ask a question, feel free to. But I don't really know what this is in reaction to. If you want to know if I would have picked Rohit Sharma or Virat Kohli, I mean, I've been on the record for about 4 years saying that I think there were better players and ways to move forward and better ways of using them. And I don't think that they should have had them in the same side. Because I don't think that's the way that you win T20 cricket. So you seem to have missed that completely. The many, many times I've said that before. And you've come in with, again, another straw man argument based on something else. I think that India is going to pick both of those players as it currently stands. And if you're going to pick both of those players, surely the captain is, I should say, I think that they're getting more towards looking at moving on from one of those players. And probably the leader is going to go in. If you're asking me if I would pick Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli for T20 cricket at the moment, I don't think I would. What I was saying is that I think the situation that India is in, that they're not going to move on from those guys, right? And so realistically, there is another argument to be said for older players trying different styles. We just saw Rohit Sharma try it in ODI cricket and be spectacular at it. And we just saw, and we've seen Virat Kohli also try that. That's probably what is going to happen. In the same way that Australia have tried to move on from Steve Smith as a T20 player multiple times and hasn't done it. Like, England's been the only team that really made a clear decision that Joe Root wasn't in their plans. And it's hard with these legends across multiple formats. And it really is quite tricky. Babar Azam and Mohammad Rizwan, cause issues as well for Pakistan. But if you're asking my actual opinion, Vikas, which I don't know if you are, because you haven't really asked the question here. I think the game moved on from them for years. And if you go through all the work I've done before, Vikas, you will know that. But we're more talking about what will happen, not what I would do. Because believe it or not, I am not an Indian selector. Although, who's looking for selectors at the moment? Is it India? I think it might be India. So I will apply. Random start to this one. Cam says, I've only really watched BBL in terms of T20 leagues, but it's always seemed to me that big name overseas players have generally been poor and inconsistent, while the slightly lesser known players are generally the stars. Laurie Evans in the last few years, compared to Quinton de Kock this season. Without any research to back that up. Well, most of the stars don't really take the Big Bash that seriously. They don't get paid all that much. The West Indians didn't want to play in it because it wasn't worth their money. I don't know if we've had that many big name stars. I mean, Rashid Khan's been an absolute gun in the Big Bash. And Alex Hales probably had 2 of the best years. And he certainly would have classified as a fairly big name, I would have thought, compared to Laurie Evans. But yeah, I think a lot of players, certainly Pakistani players and English players, have seen it as a chance to get into the into more leagues around the world and have taken it very seriously. Like I've talked to Pakistani and English players, and they really think that this is a way of improving their stock a little bit. And also because the Big Bash doesn't always go for big players, and I think that's maybe what you're really seeing is that Quinton de Kock's a good player and an IPL level opener, but he's not like the absolute star. Chris Gale came out for a little while, but a lot of the West Indians didn't want to play in it. I think Dwayne Bravo was probably the main West Indian who did want to play in it. But Rashid Khan certainly starred in it before. But it has been, if you go back to the history of the Big Bash, they are, I think, in some ways, the inability to pull over a big star for a whole season has meant that a lot of teams have gone for players that fit their problems, fit their issues within the team. And that's how, when I worked with the Stars, it was probably the only time I've ever worked in T20 cricket where, ironic being given their name, but I wasn't really ever told you have to pick the most famous player, which obviously I was when I worked for other franchises. And, they were looking for, we got Liam Plunkett over. And I didn't quite agree with that just because I understood why they wanted it, but I didn't quite agree with that because I thought there was another player that would have fit another role that we were trying to fix. But in no way were they looking to, it wasn't like Liam Plunkett was brought out because he was a World Cup winner or wasn't a World Cup winner. Would go on to win the World Cup just after that, wouldn't he? But he wasn't brought out because he was a major English player. It was that they were trying to stack the side with slightly more batting, so another bowling all-rounder, so that they had Bravo and then Plunkett, and a little bit more batting deeper down into the order to give their top order more flexibility. And then they had Marcus Stoinisson and Glenn Maxwell, so they had flexibility on both sides of the ball. And you look at the great Scorchers teams, and they were really, really good at doing that as well. Not looking for the best player, but looking for the player that actually made them a better side. But a big part of this, I think, is just that there isn't a lot of money. I'm doing a podcast about this very soon, but I think up until recently, the top player earned $230K, which is good money, don't get me wrong. But they felt that there was a lot of travel to players, and there was a lot of games. And when the BPL were paying the same money, and especially when they were paying more money, they found players that, would prefer to go and play in that. And obviously now with the 2 bigger leagues, the Big Bash is kind of, relegated to finding international players who want to get on the circuit, prove themselves and that sort of thing. I think it's still a good league to play in if you are just that Laurie Evans type player. So I'm not sure it's a good league to play in if you're a top player. I was a bit surprised by Quinton de Kock even going, if I'm being honest. Ruja says, Akshar Patel made his test debut against England 3 years ago, and England more than struggled. I think that's fair. What would be the Bazball technique for combating his bowling when he's so difficult to sweep or dance down to? Will England's batters be more focused on disrupting the lengths of the lines of the spinners? So I think the big issue with Akshar Patel was they thought... They didn't realize that this new angle that he had created, which, is him and Ish proved, and I made a video on, kind of never really had existed before in ODI, in international cricket. So they were caught a little bit off guard. And I think if you go back now, teams are playing him a little bit better. So they understand that if you play slightly inside the line to everything, it takes away a lot of his leg stump LBWs. And so I do think there is an ability to that. The other thing is that teams were quite often playing back to him and he was bowling too full. Whereas now I think teams are much more comfortable playing slightly inside the line to him and on the front foot. How you score against him, how you score against any of those bowlers, on those wickets is very interesting. I'm not sure I have an answer for that because I don't think you can sweep him unless you try and almost slog sweep him straight when those balls are a little bit fuller. Maybe there's an argument for that, and you sort of go over wide, long on rather than out to cow corner or out to deep mid wicket. But I don't think he's a natural bowler to be able to sweep to. So I think what they'll try and do is try and hit him down the ground and understand and not get caught on the back foot. But I don't know if I have a great answer to that until I really will see how they go about it. Because when you say what would be a Bazball technique for combating his bowling, on a spinning wicket, I don't know if you can just stand in your crease and hit through the line of him. And you can't really sweep him. But I do think you can defend him better. So I'm not sure I have a Bazball technique that would work perfectly for that. Richard says, how do you evaluate the Australian head coaches since 2010? Nielsen, Arthur, Lehmann, Langer, and now McDonald. The first three all left Australia in different forms of crisis. Langer seems to have not got along with the players, but all the coaches have had periods of success for the team mixed with lots of losses. Nielsen's so long ago. I just felt like the team didn't really have an identity at times with Nielsen. And I'm trying to even think back. It just felt like they were floating a little bit. That was my memory of kind of the end of Nielsen's reign. Mickey Arthur clashed with them because he was bringing in what is kind of the methods now that they probably more want, that different level of professionalism. And I think Australian cricket had, after being the leaders of professionalism, had slipped back a little bit. But also, he was never going to last very long because Australia did not want an overseas coach. And they didn't really want to be told by a South African who hadn't been a Test legend what to do. And I think there was issues there. And I think that Mickey Arthur has a slightly paternal coaching method, which maybe just didn't work with that team at that time. Lehmann obviously has some success. It's funny that Lehmann isn't tainted with the same brush that Warner and Smith and, we did the Warner video the other day and everyone's like, can't be great. He was a cheat. And I was like, well, Faf du Plessis tampered with the ball twice. And no one calls him a cheat. Like, it's weird how things stick to certain people and don't stick to other people. And Lehmann sort of got away with that, but obviously it was a really bad end to his reign. I thought they played some dumb cricket under Lehmann, if we're being honest. And it's really weird. One thing I never understood about Lehmann is he's one of the smartest cricketers you will ever see out on the field, as a captain and as a batter. And as a coach, I think that was the big thing that I was left with, that the players were like, he doesn't seem to know how to coach. So I think that's him. Langer, look, I thought he was the wrong person at the wrong time, but inherited a fairly strong team, and Lehmann had some success as well. I thought if you look at Langer's record with Western Australia, it was quite patchy as well. And again, he was a real authoritarian, which worked very well with a first-class team who had discipline issues. Although, having said that, almost all of his success was with the Scorchers, and that was with him, dare we say, cheating around the salary cap, I think is the best way of probably putting that. The ripples within that team were quite clear early on, and I was on the record saying that he was the wrong person to coach, the wrong kind of coach for that period. But again, Australia still had some success there. And then, of course, we've got McDonald, who apparently couldn't be a coach because he wasn't a Test legend and couldn't be a coach because he wasn't alpha enough. He seems to have done all right. I think he probably has the best relationship with the entire squad of any of those people that I've said. Maybe Nielsen as well. My memory of Nielsen was that the players got on with him pretty well. I think McDonald has... I think the team could still be slightly more dynamic in their strategy, but I'm not sure that's not McDonald, and that's not... although, thinking back to McDonald as a cricketer, maybe it is him, but something to do with Cummins. I think the kind of combination of Cummins, McDonald, and Bailey, three guys who just really think about stuff, has progressed Australian cricket. Whereas I think if you look back to some of the other coaches and all the captains, you maybe never had and the chairman of selectors, you maybe never had that 3-person system before that worked as well. But I'm not sure that means that McDonald is a better coach than those other guys, just that he might just be in a better place, right? And sometimes those things happen. We tend to, get a little bit excited and with these sorts of situations of this guy's a good coach. And that, I don't think Langer is a bad coach. And talking to Western Australian players, there are some issues I have with him and his style, but there are certainly people that he helped, and there's certainly other players who he didn't get along with. Mickey Arthur is, I think, a very respected person, and eventually I'll hopefully get Mickey on the podcast and we can talk about coaching and everything else. He's a very respected person, but that paternal coaching style rubs up certainly senior players who don't like that in a bad way. Lehman not kind of answering every question with a kind of just hit it harder kind of attitude was an issue. Sometimes it doesn't mean that these people don't have coaching skills. It just means that sometimes you need the ideal. So is Andrew McDonald a better coach than those other people, right? I don't know if that's true or not. It's very hard to judge coaches. What I would say is that he's a better match at the moment for the entire structure of Australian cricket than I think some of those other people were. I think there was a big move towards analytics during Lehman's time, and Lehman didn't really put a lot of faith in that. I think in Langer's time, he believed a lot more in analytics. I think he might have brought his Perth Scorchers analyst over with him, or certainly I think he was more involved in that sort of stuff. But the way that he spoke to the players at times just was, it's like an Aussie rules football coach from the 80s, which is how Langer would have grown up, by being yelled at and everything. And it was like, that kind of coaching has been proved to be kind of not work all that much as well. So I think there was a few different issues, but I don't think any of those coaches are bad coaches. And I don't think any of them are great coaches. And the main reason I also feel is I don't think anyone has changed overall the system of Australian cricket in the way that McCullum did, right? Which is a hugely different kind of thing. James says, have there been fast bowlers whose wrist control was so good that they could consistently and at will control both swing and seam movement independently in the same delivery? No. If you get your wrist absolutely perfect, I think we've certainly seen, oh my God, Ryan Harris do this before, where if you get your wrist absolutely perfect and you can have the seam going in one direction, but that it spins perfectly, sometimes it can still hit the outside of the seam and then jag away. So, I've had this in club games where I played against a bowler in club cricket who was bowling out swing, but when the ball landed, it would just seam back massively. And he wasn't even, quick by club standards. And we were all sitting there going, what are we supposed to do with this? Our hands are naturally moving with the swing, and then suddenly these balls are darting back. It was unplayable. But as far as I'm aware, that isn't the case. And you've got to understand, with genuine seam bowling, there's that Curtly Ambrose story that I'm sure I've told before of Curtly Ambrose not knowing if the ball was going to seam in or seam away. I think probably with high definition cameras, bowlers are understanding that sort of stuff a little bit more now. And Curtly would have, if he had access to that sort of stuff as well. But I think if that was an ability of a ball, if that was an ability of bowlers, we would see that ball a lot more. And you see them very rarely on freak occurrences. And even then, I don't think we've seen them all that much, if we're being honest. All right, quick break here. And then after the break, we'll come back with more questions for the room. This is Wagon Wheel, and I am Jarrod Kimber. Ever wondered why slower deliveries work? What a zombie ball is? Or how Sunil Gavaskar would have batted in T20? Well, we have the channel for you, Good Areas. Twice a week, we have a new deep dive into a great story from cricket on our main channel, Good Areas. It is the history and present of cricket as narrated by me. If you make any content, Memento is the tool for you. Take your long format pods and meetings and anything you have and let Memento cut and slice it up for social media. This AI-inspired weapon will turn your one piece of work into so many clips. Try memento.fm today. Welcome back to the Wagon Wheel. I remain Jarrod Kimber, and let's go through the rest of the Patreon questions. James says, what are some reliable indicators of a player who succeeds at first class level but will not at test level? I noted that you addressed one of these in Reading episode with Tim Wigmore. Generally, it's fast bowlers who are really dependent on the new ball, like overly dependent on the new ball. That's probably the one that I would look at most obviously. The other one is for this is a real case of Western players, so center players. Yeah, what their record is against spin, because maybe less so for the West Indians, but certainly for the other nations, they just don't play a lot of spin. And then in Test cricket, the percentage of spin goes up massively, and it's converse for the Asian players as well. So that's another thing that you want to look at, like the whole Ollie Pope thing. I really annoyed England cricket when I pointed out that his record against spin in first class cricket probably suggested that he was going to struggle in Test cricket. It's happened so far. He can still develop and everything else, but you do see that. Another thing you want to look for in domestic cricket numbers is home records. Really, really inflated home records compared to away. Like if you're solid away, but if you've got an average of like 55 in domestic cricket, but you average 70 at your home ground and 35 everywhere else, I don't know if those numbers pan out, but that's a real problem. So the whole James Hildreth thing, if you have a look at his record at some compared to his batting everywhere else, it was hard to make the case that he would go, because once you go into Test cricket, you might, well, in some cases, you might never play on your home wicket. So how you go in other places, and that's one other thing I would look at, and I've done this quite a few times, is look at players' records on test venues compared to non-test venues, because quite often first-class cricket is very, very different on a non-test venue than on a test venue. So those are sort of the obvious ones. Where you bat is another really important one. If you don't bat in the top four, chances are you have a pretty cruisy ride in first-class cricket. That is not the case for everyone. I think it's less of a case in Asia just because of the way that spinners go. But, looking at that, if you've got someone who's averaging 50 at number 5, it is worth looking at how often they go in early, what their record is against pace bowling and everything else, and these sorts of things. Because in first-class cricket, chances are you've only got one test quality bowler bowling against you, the majority of games. And certainly, if that's a seam bowler and you're not facing the new ball, then it's going to be a much easier job to score runs. So those are all the different things I'm looking at. For a spinner, I would probably look at the danger. If I look at footage of a spinner, I'd be looking at how dangerous their stock ball is, because that's a really important one in Test cricket. I wouldn't be worried about all their other balls. Just how dangerous is their stock ball? Can they keep pressure on with that stock ball and take wickets with it? For fast bowlers, I would be looking at what they did when the pitch went flat. Do they have a plan B or plan C available to them? Or once the pitch goes flat, are they kind of useless to you? And if I was doing advanced numbers in batting, I would be looking at the ball by ball average against the bowlers with a better than average career mark compared to the bowlers with a worse one, just to give yourself a little bit of extra information on the batters. Ali says, if it wasn't for ODIs, do you think Tests and T20s would be two separate sports? I think eventually, Ali, they will be three different sports. I still think that's on the cards. So I don't think that ODIs is the reason they're keeping together. The reason they're keeping together is that the cricket boards that run Tests also run T20. That's why it has happened. I do think there is a huge possibility in the future we might have three different sports governed by three different organizations. But I don't think ODI cricket is the thing holding that together at the moment. Scott says, why has Scott Edwards never played first class list A or T20 cricket in the domestic Australian scene? Only being picked up by the Renegades recently. He has a good ODI record, decent T20, won the Jack Ryan medal in Victoria. I find it hard to believe there's many keepers better than Edwards in Australia. I think the main reason is, and I could be wrong, I'd have to go right through his record, but my memory is that he's been a bit of a late bloomer. And it's the... Yeah, I don't know when he won that Jack Ryder medal. That's the best club cricketer in Melbourne, that medal. Sorry for Melbourne inside nerdery, but Scott probably knew I could answer that. Having watched him for years, he's by far and away a better player now than he was even 3 years ago. I think 3 years ago, I thought of him as, I'm trying to think of the best way of putting it, but I thought of him as a more of a associate level player who was probably just below, top level, first class kind of status or domestic cricket around the world status. And he's clearly well above that now. And so I do think that, a part of that is, oh my God, how many Scott Edwards are there? So I'm just trying to look up his numbers. If I can bring up, if I can look at T20 numbers, here he is. Because I'm hoping it will show me what I want to show. So he's played 51 matches. It's maybe not enough matches. If we look at his batting by year, sorry about this. So he hadn't even played T20 cricket for the Netherlands before 2018. And so I think he does break out a little bit there. But even in 2000, after having a couple of pretty good runs as far as runs or strike rate went, he then had a year where he played in 2021, played 7 T20s, and had an average 16 with a strike rate of 108. That was probably the point of where he was more likely to break out, I would say. And let me just, dude, where is the dude? I've lost him again. And if we also then go to his List A record, which is a few extra games. Where are we here? So he started playing. Oh, it's still around 2017. So I mean, think about it. Even Netherlands-wise, he wasn't doing particularly well. But you look at his first year of playing List A cricket, which is probably mostly ODIs in his case. He averages 16 with a strike rate of 65, and then in 2021, he averages 22 with a strike rate of 72. So what you're seeing now, and I remember planning for him with Scotland, I wasn't planning for like this player that we see now. His ability to sweep has really changed him. He's probably one of the most eager sweepers in the world and really, really good at it as well. And I'm not saying he wasn't like that before, but I think it has leveled him up, his ability to do that. So I do think in his case he's gone up. But the truth is also players develop at different ages, but also players are missed in those major systems, right? Like you don't get the right coach, you don't play for the right club team, you don't make runs in the right games, you come through and there's another wicketkeeper of a similar age, in a similar background, all those sorts of things can happen. But right at the moment, he's certainly playing at that level, and maybe it's a year too late. But you look at that record. It probably what did him in a little bit was that he had bad years even after he had a bit of a breakthrough, and that Netherlands he wasn't always playing for the. Netherlands weren't always playing a lot of games. And sometimes these things matter. Also, when it comes to T20 cricket, if you don't have the right agent, you don't get picked up in some of those feeder type level leagues. The GA, is it GL, the Canada League or whatever. You need the right agents. And if he made some runs in one of those, he probably would have been fast tracked as well. Nadika says, would it be easier to create a franchise test cricket league in women's cricket than men's cricket, since the national cricket boards don't seem interested in organising tests? You would have... I don't know what the lengths and lines and the spinners mean at the end of your question. Sorry. Would it be easier? Yes, but you'd need someone with a real vision and the financial... because the difference is, let's say you're ZTV and you were going to do this, which they were a few years ago. They know that there is a dedicated amount of people who will just watch Test cricket, right? For men. They know they're already there. We just have to make sure that there's games on Boxing Day and in the middle of England summer, and in the dry seasons in Asia, all those sorts of basic things, right? And they'll get some views. They'll probably assume that it's a franchise league. They might get a bit of a drop off. I think that's fair, but they will assume that these things will happen. With women's cricket, there is no viewership at all, because it doesn't exist, right? And they're played so randomly, and when they come up and everything else, that they don't have that to do. So you would need to be very visionary to do it. But if you're asking if it is possible to buy the best women's cricketers and just make a league, whether it be Test cricket, ODI cricket, or T20 cricket. It's baffling to me why that hasn't, how that hasn't happened already. If, as far as I'm aware, women's tennis and men's tennis are operated separate to each other. Women's cricket used to be operated separate, but they did that from a position of weakness back then. There is every opportunity that women's cricket will be separated from men's cricket again in the future, would be my guess. And if someone came to me at the moment and said, I've got $100 million to invest in cricket, I'd be like, I reckon we could buy most of the women's cricketers in the world and just play them exactly as we want them to play, and work out which markets, which different things work in, and go from there. There would be some issues with those rebel leagues, but I'm not sure it would be. In some places, I think they'd see it as I think that there's still a feeling within some certain parts of men's cricket that would take a headache away from them. There would be other cricket boards who would be furious, but I think you could probably afford to do that quite easily. And I think investing in women's cricket is probably going to give you a potentially higher rate on your investment, just because the growth of women's cricket is so big and it doesn't cost as much money to get involved with. Bloody Bugger says, since the death of Philip Hughes, I don't believe the laws related to bouncers have changed much. I think that the fatal strike was was in the first innings, so think concussion substitution rule wouldn't have made a difference. I'm not sure quite what you mean by that. Has helmet technology evolved greatly since then? If not, is there anything preventing another Hughes-like death? So the big thing that's changed, Bloody, is that they have the flaps at the back where he got hit. That's the biggest change that we've seen. I don't think that was seen as a weak spot before. And they also didn't know how to protect it. But of course, once a player had died, they had to. A concussion substitute, I don't think would have mattered in that particular case anyway. Because I could be wrong. It's been quite a few years since that happened. But I don't think a concussion substitute would have changed. So we had concussion substitute rule come in, not because of Phil Hughes, but kind of separate to that, just because, there was a high likelihood that some former cricketers had CTE, and that, cricket was going to get, I already think that there is plenty of proof out there that players have had CTE before, in some of the things we've seen, with some of the former players, especially from the 70s and 80s, when the bouncers become a really big deal. So that's kind of separate. But yeah, the helmet bit at the back was really the only change I think we have seen since then. It could still happen again. I don't think those are the be-all and end-all of protecting players. I think in some ways, cricket has probably been lucky to not have as many deaths from the short ball as it could have. Someone will get hurt again. But at the moment, we're more worried about that sort of CTE, which is the repetitive hits to the head, even when you wear a helmet, than anything else. But perhaps those neck things are better than I'm imagining, and will protect some future ones. I still think cricket helmet design has a long way to go, I think, would be my... there's two things. A, helmets are, it's only the last few years they've really become hugely scientifically advanced, and I still think they have a huge way to go. But I still think there is going to be more discussions about the short ball in the future. I find it hard to believe that, especially to tail enders and to lower order batters, you'll be allowed to pump them the way that some teams seem to do it at the moment. But I'm also not sure how you do it unless you have like a drastic thing like rugby. I really don't know how you long-term fix a problem like that. GD says, how would you compare Adelaide to bigger centres like Sydney or Melbourne in terms of development opportunities, cost of living, exposure for a young up-and-coming cricketer, or age group dependent on family? What would be a comparable region in England or India? Adelaide's weird because it was once a major part of cricket, and Adelaide really as a city just kind of got, fell behind in terms of population compared to Brisbane and Perth. And so they sort of both went past it. And then in terms of cricket, really from the 90s until to now, it's been an issue. that they haven't produced as many cricketers as they should, even population wise. Like Tasmanian cricket's done quite well at times, even with even in Tasmania's case of rehoming other cricketers who couldn't make it. Adelaide's really struggled to make any impact on, or South Australia I should say, on cricket. It has great facilities there, fairly stable pitches all the way through their cricket, good outgrounds and things like that. It just doesn't probably have the money of some of the big Melbourne and Sydney teams, maybe even the big Brisbane teams. And South Australia just has been a mess for a very, very long, for a long time. And they haven't just found a way to make themselves relevant again, I think is probably the fairest way of putting it. But there's still good coaches and good players and good facilities and everything there. What's a comparable region in England? Is it like a Somerset, perhaps? I mean, it's unfair because Somerset's like a tiny friggin' little village. Really, like Taunton is not a big place. And so maybe that's even unfair. And comparable to India, I don't know. Australia is such a weird kind of city in that way. A weird city-based place in that it has 4, maybe 5 if you count Adelaide, sort of major cities in it, and almost nothing else. And so Adelaide's kind of holding on to the end of that last relevant city place. Something like Hyderabad, maybe. But I feel that's unfair to Hyderabad and to Somerset because of how well their cricket has gone at times. But yeah, it has all the facilities of the rest of Australia, but it just hasn't been producing players at a high level. Like I think their statues at the ground are Grimmett, who's obviously a Kiwi, Gillespie, and Lehman. And Gillespie, is a fine cricketer, but I don't know. I think he gets a statue in some other places. Lehman, as an international cricket, probably doesn't in some other places. And I think it tells you that they just haven't produced consistently for a very, very long time that level of cricketers coming through. And I don't think there's any reason why they haven't, if we're being honest. But, you talk about cost of living. My memories of Adelaide is that it's certainly a lot cheaper than Perth, Sydney, and Melbourne. But exposure for a young cricketer, I would assume, is maybe not as great, just because there hasn't been that consistent success. Now, having said that, I think there's an interesting young crop of South Australian cricketers coming through at the moment that I have, an eye on from a distance. If they get successful again, then the exposure comes back, right? But yeah, it is. It feels like even Tasmania has gone past them at times in cricket, and population-wise, I don't think that should happen. So it's probably an issue for South Australian and Adelaide cricket. Philip says, haven't heard much about hybrid pitches since the women use them in the Commonwealth Games. Do you know how the development is going and the use coming along, if at all? I think they were used in Major League Cricket, were they? I think that's the case. The technology is still really early on. It's kind of, no one really knows what hybrid pitches will be in the future. I talked to Wasim Khan about it a little bit at the time because he's obviously very pro them. I think there's 2 or 3 companies that are involved. It's like a lot of things in cricket. I think it just needs some outside development money to come in. And if that happened, it would change things quite drastically. But that, doesn't always, that doesn't happen all the time. So I do think from that point of view that it's probably holding it back. It's the same thing with that, was it Sport Track, their balls? There's a few, the bat handle sensors. There's a few things that have come into cricket that are really good ideas, but no one has worked out how to make money from them. And I think that might be the case again here with this. But we will see more and more hybrid wickets coming in. Of that, there is absolutely no doubt. All right, I'll just stop for a quick break, and we'll be back again in a moment with more Wagon Wheel with myself, Jarrod Kimber. Sometimes you just need to take the slips out and bowl defensively, and you need to be just as careful with your computer's defenses. If you need a VPN, NordVPN.com/Kimber
will get you a big discount and 4 additional months for free with your NordVPN plan. They also have a 30-day money-back guarantee if you don't like it. You can find the link in the show notes. So start with some dot balls and turn them into maidens with NordVPN/Kimber. If you love cricket so much that you want to show the world, there is no better way than chucking on a Bodyline t-shirt with incredible cricket themes on them. Old icons, new stars, they have everything you need for cricket clothing on Bodyline t-shirts.
All right. Patrick says, will Cricket Australia and Nick Hockley's proclamations about wanting to play more teams and supporting smaller nations actually amount to anything? I think they genuinely believe it. Don't see it happening. I kind of think it with, in some ways, this is the wrong time. If they were going to make a difference, it would have been 20 years ago. I don't know if Cricket Australia has the ability to change anything for small nations now. What would be great? Maybe a Papua New Guinea Big Bash team would be maybe more helpful. Can you support Fijian cricketers again? I still think a partnership with New Zealand cricket rather than having 2 different tournaments, would be better for probably both countries, if we're being honest, especially because there is, precedent there with basketball, rugby, netball. Can't remember if they're New Zealand teams in netball as well. I think that would be better things. I mean, they don't mean New Zealand when they're talking about smaller nations. But I also honestly think that those things are much better. Also, maybe, I know there was a really good plan at one stage. They had the Hong Kong women, a couple of them, being involved with the women's Big Bash teams, those sorts of things, which I think are still ongoing. But I haven't, seen as much of them recently. Showing the women from the associate nations and men as well, what professionalism is. All those sorts of things could be really, really handy. So I'm on board with it, but I don't know if just playing them anymore has the same impact that it would have. However, it's still a good move. But if you ask me, I don't know what will come of it. Ian says, England understandably have gone spin heavy for the India tour. They certainly have. And would imagine that 3 of them probably aren't in the squad come the first test of the summer with the likes of Wokes certainly back in. The adapting to wildly different surfaces and conditions makes sense. That being the case, is it odd that the batting lineup is essentially exactly the same as the summer? The conditions will be totally different for batting too. This has always been my issue with the horses for courses. It seems to be about the bowlers. I think England have probably gone a fair way to looking for specialist players in certain conditions over the years. And maybe Keaton Jennings was someone who was on that path. Maybe even Ben Duckett was another player that was on that path. But yeah, we take players all the time that aren't particularly good against spin and make them bad against spin, and then they fail. And quite often they drop from the team for being not good against the thing we already knew they weren't good against. And with bowlers, we specialise them. I do think in the future of cricket, Ian, will be more of that coming up. James says, would it be fair to expect younger bowlers to succeed more in red ball than white ball? Based on that red ball bowling is largely about consistent bowling your best ball, whereas white ball bowling requires outthinking the batters. Ooh, really interesting. I think younger bowlers tend to be more athletically gifted and older bowlers tend to be smarter, right? Which would make sense, of course. And so if you are athletically gifted, and that's the reason that you're in international cricket, you might not have all the skills of just landing the ball on the right spot and everything else anyway. And so you might be freakishly tall or freakishly fast or have a really weird, release of the ball, which early on really helps you in cricket, will help you in white ball as much as red ball. Maybe even more so in white ball, in fact. And it's later as you develop all those other skills, the accuracy, the soft little technical skills that you pick up, that you become that sort of different, older, more wise kind of bowler. So no, I don't think so. But I get your point, but I don't think that's right. Scott says, considering that number threes have a very different role to play depending on whether they're coming in at 1 for 5 or 1 for 120, why not have different players who suit each role coming in depending on the situation? Okay, I've had this discussion with 2 major teams, and I've had this discussion with coaches before. I don't understand why Jonathan Trott is the right man to come in when you're 10 for 1 and the right man to come in when you're 200 for 1. Kevin Peterson is the right person to come in when you're 200 for 1. Some people agree with me. Some people don't. I think I'm hoping that the future of cricket, we go away from players are good in a certain number and we go towards players are good in different situations, because I think that is a fairer, smarter way to use your talent. Based on my conversations, it's not a particularly close thing that is about to happen. But look, it's been discussed, Scott. You're certainly not the first person within cricket to come up with this. I don't think I was the first person to come up with this either. It makes sense to use your players when you want to use them for their best skills. And I don't think we do that at the moment. And T20 cricket is obviously moving towards it. Yeah, I think the early cricket was a lot more flexible with batting orders. And it's really interesting that I've talked about it before, that sort of the tyranny of the batting order. Oh, I'm a number 4 and I'm a number 5. There are probably reasons why batters prefer to be at number 4 and number 5, because their skills probably suit that position, one more than the other, right? And that's fine. So use them. You're not really a number 4 or number 5 then. You're really good when this is happening, right? And we see guys who bat at number 6 and 7 sometimes, and you think they should be coming out now at 3 and 4 in this kind of conditions, in this kind of game. So I do think and hope that will be something that we'll see more of in the future. Will says, what are you playing on Cricket 24 at the moment? Worth getting into if you have Cricket 22. I don't have either of those. So I have Don Bradman 17, which I don't like at all. That's on Switch, is it? No, I got that on PlayStation. And I have Cricket 19 on Switch. And Bayram has told me that Cricket 24 is the best cricket game that he's played, and he's quite into cricket games. So I kind of trust him. I kind of, after 2002, didn't play. I'm only getting back in the game because my kids are into it. My oldest boy's a real gamer, and the other boy loves esports games. So I probably will get Cricket 24. I will probably get it on the PlayStation. I actually think, in general, Cricket 24 has missed a real trick not getting involved with podcasters, tweeters, TikTokers, this whole new network of people that is out there. We saw Wicket Cricket Manager certainly had an influx, and they were, I think, just involved with me. And Cricket 24 should have more of a budget to be able to spread it around. Even if you just said to people, "Here's the game early. Tell us what console you play. We'll get it to you, and you can do a video or review of it." I just don't see why. And again, I feel like Big Ant Studio are just missing a trick and not being involved with the conversation. I think they might have done stuff with King Cricket before, back in the day. I think it was them, or it might have been another company. But there's so many people that make content about cricket anymore. And I just think that a lot of cricket fans don't even really know that much about these games. I really like Cricket 19. I think it's the best game I've played in cricket. And so I'm really excited to try Cricket 24. And also, I probably, I'd rather on PlayStation than Switch. I do more gaming on PlayStation now than I do on Switch. Now that we have both, it's just obviously, better gaming experience. But I would love the ability to play some of those other games and everything. But I really think that for a lot of us in the 90s, I think cricket games were a big part of our upbringing. It was funny. I was just talking to my a friend from back home, and he was saying that stick cricket is the only game that most of his friends play when it comes to cricket now, which is still great that it exists. But there's a lot of us that grew up with interesting cricket games. The Alan Border Graham Gooch game, the Brian Lara, Shane Warne games. Those sorts of things where were not fantastic in every way, but we really enjoyed them. And I feel like a whole generation has missed out on cricket games outside of perhaps the Don Bradman games. And there's no real reason for that. And I think it's, again, should be something that we should be seeing the Cricket 24 advertised on cricket broadcasts and talked about, and, getting Jonathan Agnew to play Michael Vaughan in a game. Like, there's just a lot of mispromotional stuff. And I think my memory is, and I can't remember if it was Cricket 22 or Cricket 19, but my memory is that Wisden, I think it was Wisden, did a thing where they had, it might have been the cricketer, did a thing where they got players to come in and play the game, and then had professional commentators to talk about it. I know it was during COVID. I know you're not going to do it all the time. But again, it just feels like in cricket, everything is kind of separated, and no one is thinking the bigger picture of, how do we get Athers and Nasser to play, or, Shastri and Bogle to play? Like, just cool little segments like that. And everything is just kind of separated and moved. And I really think there should be more done for cricket in this way. Anyway, as a person who has played cricket games as well, like I did really, really love them. All right, I know there's a couple of super chats. I'll get to the super chats. Chat is bumping by the look of it. I will only be able to get to a couple, but I'll see what we have. Give me one moment, and we'll have one of those things that they call, and I'm trying to find an ad that is long enough that will allow me to actually read your comments.
NordVPN know nothing about knuckleballs, but they can help you with online safety. If you need a VPN, use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a huge discount and 4 months for free. They also have a 30-day money-back guarantee, which is risk-free. The link is in the show notes. So stop thinking about knuckleballs for 2 minutes and go to nordvpn.com/Kimber and get your deal.
Support us on Patreon. Join for exclusive perks like AMAs, live calls with me, and a vibrant Discord community. Enjoy ad-free content, early podcast episodes, and access to my emailer, plus behind-the-scenes stuff. We've built our channel on Patreon support, so a huge thanks to everyone who has helped. In cricket, I don't believe in momentum, but when it comes to my social media videos, I like Memento. Its AI listens to me so that I don't have to, and then it can chuck in GIFs and subtitles and make it all fit all the different kinds of social media sizes. Memento does it all. It slices, it dices, and it resizes all of your hottest takes, your coldest facts, and your weirdest vibes. Grab it today and make your content start smashing the ball all around social media.
We've got a couple of super chats, so I'll finish up with those today. But thank you to everyone in the comments again. It really helps leaving a comment on YouTube. Who have we got here first? Noel says, how often do international batsmen buy their new bats, and how much different is a fresh bat to an old bat? Well, they don't buy bats. I don't think any international batters would buy bats. Maybe like associate level cricketers. Even then, I would have thought that they should have a supplier by that stage. I could be wrong. There might be some international men or women from, in lower associate level cricket that do it. But anyone that kind of we see on the TV, I don't think they would pay for their own bats. They quite often have relationships where they will have a bat sponsor, but the bat sponsor doesn't make their bats. And so they go to a bat maker. And so within that, they might pay the bat maker, but out of the bat sponsorship money. That is a possible thing. But I know of situations where bat makers from independent companies have been subsumed into major companies because the major player has said, this is the only person who makes my bat. If you want to be the person who makes my bat, you have to hire this person. Then this contract work. And so it's all a bit weird. Different players like different kinds of wood. So some players like hardwood. Hey. Some players like softwood. Woo! And softwood bats obviously break a little bit quicker. That's the current fashion. So if you're an international player and you're an international batter, you probably throughout a year are going to have anywhere between 8 and 20 bats would be my guess. The top, Steve Smith's type guys, probably have a lot more than that. But I think more average sort of player will have between 8 and 20. Also now, if you're a multi-format batter, you probably have a few extra ones as well. Is there any advantage using an old bat? Just confidence, I think, as much as anything now. Like, I know what this bat does and I know how it will react in this situation. So I feel pretty confident to be able to do that. So, people don't really knock bats in anymore. So, from that point of view, I don't think it's anything else. But you get one bat that's £2.8 and you get another bat that's £2.8 and one of them just feels better in your hands sometimes. You know, the balance is different, all those sorts of things. So that would be an advantage to using an old bat. But bats just don't last as long. Modern international bats are not designed to last, right? So your bat that you pay 600 quid for, which is, you know, the sorts of prices that you might have to pay now, that will be, you know, should be able to last you a good couple of years, right? But even that bat in the old days, if you paid a fortune for a bat, the idea would be that it would last for 10 years. That is not the way that modern bats are made. So even when you're spending a lot of money as an amateur now, then you know, you're not getting as much. But because it is wood, you can't actually tell how long a bat is going to last. And as I said before, the difference between hardwoods and the softwoods, and you know, hardwood bats quite often crack, softwood bats just kind of break. Then you've got the grip and everything, and you know how that some people might have a blade that they really like and they might want to put a new grip in, or you know, there's all these different things that go out there. But a really interesting question. Share a tank. Says, did England pick Bashir and Hartley to play or to simulate Akshar and Ashwin in the nets? Seems like Leach, Ahmed, and Root will be their leads. No, I think they picked them also to play because they've been pretty confident before at taking net bowlers out. Like that's a thing now we see in international cricket. India and England are certainly the two teams off the top of my head that will take net bowlers out. So no, they do think there's a chance they will play. Their fear with Ahmed is he's too slow, and obviously they know Root will be handy at times, but not useful at other times. Also, Root really likes bowling against left-handers, right? And you know, that's not really a massive thing with Indian cricket. So no, I do believe, mate, that they think that one of them will play at a time, and maybe both of them, and they believe that they will get something out of those guys as bowlers in the games. Ikant says, "What are your cricketing cheap thrills?" I read this when I was during the ad, and I was thinking, I'm not really sure what he means. I'm not sure what a cheap thrill is. Like, is that a meme I'm missing or something? There are little things in cricket that I find just make me feel better. So the straight on position, or the straight position, straight hit, I think it's called. I love when that is brought out because that just shows you that the batter has actually warped the fielding map. It's so rare. I love a leg slip for quick bowls, which we've seen a lot of in the last couple of years. So maybe I like that less than I used to. I like a player bowling in a hat occasionally, or a wicket keeping in short sleeves, just to mess with people's minds. You know, really little sort of cricket nerdy stuff like that that most cricket fans just don't give a shit about. Like those sorts of things, I think I really, really enjoy. Experimental fields as well. I really do like experiment. That period where Steve Smith was averaging 60 odd and like teams were just making up a new fielding, that was my heaven. That was some of the most enjoyable times I had. I still haven't found my old notebook that has all the different fielding maps in it. Brilliant. Thank you for your super chat too. Somebody says, when should we expect your piece on the 50 greatest batters? So it's a book. So it will come out in about a year and a half's time with Bloomsbury. I've got another book coming up before then as well on the first time that teams beat England, which is pretty cool. But that big one will be book. There will be occasional podcasts that will come out beforehand, and the reason being is I won't tell you, but I have a very big name test legend who is coming on the podcast shortly, and you know, it's partly a promotional thing to promote something for him, so I can't wait. But the vast majority of the podcasts with the interviews with the players, I've already got some really interesting players lined up to chat to me. I can't wait to get in and see. I've already talked to some really older players as well. I talked to Bob White and Brian Stott, some old county players, about some of the old county legends from the 50s and 60s. So there will be the odd podcast that will pop, that will come out. Like there's certainly one that is going to be quite soon, but the vast majority of it won't be out for about a year and a half. But then we will be doing a lot of content with it. So we'll do a huge podcast, a huge video series over on the main channel about it. And we will release as many of the podcasts that sound good as possible at that stage, partly to promote the book, but also because, you know, I might have, I don't know, I'll just say someone I definitely won't get. Let's say I got an interview with Sachin, right? I'm going to have 40 minutes with Sachin, hopefully, or 20 minutes with Sachin. I might only use 7 or 8 really key quotes for the book, but it would be unfair to you guys if I spent 20 minutes talking about other great batters with Sachin to not just release it for you, right? And, I've got test players, I've got some modern ODI players, I've got, an old cricket coach, a couple of other players, as I said, a test legend, a couple of other really great players as well. Bowlers is another one. I'm trying to get a bunch of really great bowlers from the sort of 80s, 90s, 2000s to come on and talk. I just want to give you guys as much of that content as possible. And, a lot of it in podcast form will probably go on Double Century because that's kind of where the idea originally came out of. We will also want to do a series, hopefully between me and Andy Zoltzman, where we literally go through the list. But second part of your question, is AB de Villiers, the test cricketer, underrated? Yeah, I think so. I think he's certainly one that, me and Cheyenne have spent a lot of time looking at this, and we really rate his record. His problem is longevity compared to some of the other great players. And I think there's with almost every player, there's a couple of things where, you have to weigh up how important this is, or, where they come out of it and everything else. But he'll definitely be in the book, and he'll definitely be in the top 50. I think and I'm just guessing at the moment, he's probably top 30 at the moment. Maybe top 25 even. I don't know. I don't think he's top 20. But he's ahead of, he's ahead of some really, really fantastic cricketers. So I think that tells you where he is. The wicketkeeper element's really interesting because obviously him, Kumar, Andy Flower all get bumps. Walcott? Is Walcott the wicketkeeper? I always get confused with Weeks Walcott. Yeah, Walcott was the wicketkeeper, wasn't he? And Walcott is the other one. So there's a few guys that get a bit of a bump from wicketkeeping. That I think, we don't have a metric that says that, but also wicketkeepers generally bat lower, so they come down in our rating. It's a really complicated system that we've come up with. We're trying to be as fair as possible to players who played in 1890 and as fair as possible to players who play under the current strains of today. But yeah, it's been heaps of fun. We've got a real rough list at the moment, but it's the first time we've really had a list from 1 to 50 that I think we feel comfortable in. Abhishek Mukherjee is working on the project as well. So me and Cheyenne both have our lists, and then eventually we'll get Abhishek to come up with his 50 as well. But it's been great. I love it. Bloomsbury want to do this book properly, and 100% I'm on their side. I'm really thankful to them for giving me the book deal and everything else. But like being a year and a half out, it's so annoying because I'm in the middle of so much of the work of it at the moment. I want to tell you guys everything. But don't worry, we'll catch up. We'll catch up. I got so much with it, and it really, and then hopefully we will move on to bowlers after that as well, and again, overall cricketers, and really hoping that this is something that goes ahead, becomes a big deal. Hopefully we sell a couple of copies of the books and Bloomsbury come back, and it really allows us to do some things. But they've been wonderful so far, and really happy. Book is called, I believe, The Art of Batting, and I've been overwhelmed by reaching out to a lot of older players. We try and get them on the podcast occasionally, and sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they never get back to you. Almost everyone I've gotten hold of so far is not only I said yes, but it's just been excited for the topic, right? Of their ability to talk about the great batters that they grew up with and played against and played with, and so it's been fantastic so far. In fact, one of the people I won't name him, but like I gave him a bunch of. In fact, 2 of the people I contacted, I gave a bunch of players. And they were, no, I can talk about this guy and this guy, and I was like, great. I cannot wait for this. So big thanks to Sami, Ekanth, and everyone else for their super chats. Sorry it was such a full show today. We couldn't get to all the different comments there, but thank you to everyone who left a comment in. As I said, these things really, really help with everything that we do. Oh, wait, sorry. Did I just get one last super chat? Oh, I did. Divya Javine. Sorry, I probably got that horribly wrong. Who do you reckon is the most underrated present-day cricketer? Ooh. I don't know if I can answer that at the end for you. Most underrated modern-day cricketer. Is Kemar Roach on that list, maybe? ODI cricketer? I suppose it was Mohammad Shami until a couple of weeks ago. T20 cricketer. Don't know if I have a great answer for T20 cricketer. It's a really good question. I was going to say Faf, but Faf was almost overrated for ages, and now it's kind of underrated. Yeah, no, it's a really good one, but I don't know if I have great answers for that. But hopefully that helped anyway. But thank you very much for your super chat. That's the end of Wagon Wheel. I'm Jarrod Kimber, and I will see you again next time for another one of these thingies, because we do a lot of them. I'm here all the time. I feel like I am anyway.
If you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber, Kimber, to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a night watchman protects his stumps in the last over. If you make a lot of content like me, and I certainly do, you will need some help. And that is why on my network, we use Memento, a slicing and dicing tool that uses AI to conjure up great clips from your podcasts, chats, and meetings. If you make content and you want a better way of sharing it and making it smaller, go to memento.fm today.
Remember that cricket is a funny game. 100 years before we protected our heads, players looked after their groin. So don't be as stupid as old cricketers. Protect your computer. NordVPN is the protection I use when facing cyber short balls or when the rights issue tried to dismiss me. NordVPN will help you get through the straight bat of any GEO blocks so you can watch all the cricket you want. If you need your pitch changed, well, NordVPN can doctor any surface to a new location so your IP address is set up for you to win. Want to buy an associate cricket shirt from a place that won't ship to your country? Select NordVPN. Want to watch a game on a free stream in another hemisphere? Give NordVPN the ball. Or if you just want to watch a clip on social media that the cricket board won't allow, promote NordVPN to pinch it. So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a cricketer protects their nether region with NordVPN